Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Dirty Gaming and the second episode of the Tornado Shot Play With Me series. I've spent only 3 hours farming my original Atlas strategy that I put in the first video, and I've got enough currency to make enough upgrades that I can then decide to boost up my Atlas strategy and do something different. Feel free to stay on the strat as long as you want. It is a solid 4 divines an hour, but you can certainly earn much more doing other strategies. And with the upgrades you're going to make, it will make the build a lot stronger to be able to push and make some more currency. So in terms of the loot that I've had drop, it's mostly stuff you'd expect to drop. Invitations, I did forget to do the Polaric every now and again, but it's not a huge amount of currency. Lots of Eldritch currency, Awakened Sextants, Chaos Orbs, got some Scarabs, Orbs by making, some Div cards. We did have a Squire card drop from one of the altars, which is, I think, about 1.7 divine, so that's a nice chunk of currency. Other than that, nothing really to note. There's a couple of fractured items that might sell for like 10 or 15C. This is the overflow of glacier maps that we had just from 4 full invitation runs. You can either sell these in bulk, but what I'm probably going to do is just put them into the map device, properly influence, leave, and then just turn over a couple of invitations really quickly, because that'll take my divines up to about 15 to 16. So the loot we've got is around 12 to 13 divines once we've sold it all. And that was in just less than 3 hours. So yeah, solid income of about 4.25 to 4.5 divines, which is nice considering we were running white maps and it was self-sustainable, so it didn't cost us any currency. And it was super safe. I'm level 97 and I've got up to 85% XP. I did die once because halfway through I decided to put Deli Mirrors into the strategy and I got trounced by a rare monster when I was up to like 5 rewards. So we quickly dropped Deli out of the strategy and carried on. But at 97, I've got a good chunk of a level. So if you were lower level, say 91, 92, you should have definitely made a couple of levels nice and safely, because there really isn't anything that could kill you as long as you don't stand into loads of on-death effects and things like that. There really isn't anything that should kill you. So what we're going to do is look for upgrades. Now, I did mention in the last video what I was looking to do, but the helm enchant is much more expensive than I thought. It's like 10 to 12 divines, maybe even 15 divines to get it on a decent base. So I think there's other upgrades we could do that can give us more bang for our buck. We obviously do want that helmet at some point, but for now, we're just going to leave it. In terms of selling loot, I'm probably just going to sell the stuff that easily sells for divines or lots of chaos, and the rest I'll keep to do maybe a big selling session later. I just need to sell enough to get the upgrades that I want. So we'll obviously be selling our invitations. They should sell instantly. These will sell for a divine, these gilded divination scarabs. All of the Eldritch currency will sell really quickly. The Chaos Orbs will obviously keep until we've got enough to turn them into divines. Awakened Sextants, depending what they are, we'll just wait until we've got a divine's worth and sell them. So have a look at the moment. It's about 46 for a divine, so we just need a few more and we can offload those for a divine. And then anything like this Delirium Orb that we had drop, which is probably worth like 30C, will sell. Anything that's not going to be too much chaos, I'm not going to worry at this stage. We had a full set of Wretched cards drop, so you could sell these, I would think, fairly comfortably for sort of 25 to 30C, or you can gamble it, try and get yourself a Headhunter or a Mage Blood. Outside the Squire card, we had a few cards that are worth like 5C, 10C, but I probably won't sell them until we get more of them. So what I'll do is I'll go and just liquidate a lot of the loot, we'll get some currency, and then we'll go and shop for upgrades. So I've sold a lot of the stuff now. I actually had a bit more value than I thought. So we've still got in my sale tab around 2 divines worth of stuff. We've got a divine's worth of Grand Embers. Then we've got probably about a divine's worth of Unmakings, Embers, and then the other gear that we're selling. So that's going to take us, including this chaos, to over 12 divines that we've liquidated already, which is pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is run 28 of these maps just to get another invitation to sell. And that should give me enough currency to be able to make the upgrades that I need. And then we'll do these live as we go through, and I'll explain exactly what I'm doing to upgrade the build. Okay, so that was a bit of work, but I've finished the upgrades that I wanted to do from the last farming session. I've spent nearly every penny I've got. I ended up having to do 2 more invitation rounds where we're just putting the map in, spawning the influence, then killing the boss on the 28th, because I found a quiver for 3 divines that I wanted to buy that gave me an additional arrow. It basically had 3 suffixes that were amazing. It had crit multi, increased projectile speed, and it had bows fire an additional arrow, and it had increased damage of bows as a prefix, and then 2 empty prefixes. So I basically just slammed 2 exalts. I got super lucky and got massive life, then got fizz damage, which doesn't really do very much. The base of the quiver is not great, but I really needed 1 extra arrow because we've now dropped GMP. So I'm going to go through all of the upgrades I made and really the priority order that I did it in. So the first thing I wanted to do was get away from purity of elements because it doesn't really give me anything and it's quite easy to get ailment immune from this area on the tree. Dropping it means I can add in anger and that gives me like 15 to 20% more DPS. It seems a bit of a no-brainer. So what I've done, I purchased an Ancestral Vision jewel. So I've had to drop the rare jewel that we were running, which was really nice because we need a space to put Ancestral Vision. And this was 1.3 divines. And what this gives you is whatever your spell suppression is, and it can be over cap, half of that goes to avoid elemental ailments. And we're at about cap. We don't actually need that much. We only need about 40%. But so this gives us 50% ailment immunity. I've then had to rejig the tree a bit, drop these life nodes up here and take this wheel here because they give me 20% chance to avoid elemental ailments. So that means just with the jewel and this area of the tree, I have 70. So then I've essentially recrafted my boots. So I had some fractured movement speed slink boots anyway. So I've crafted them with a resistance essence until it life, another resistance and an open suffix to craft the missing elemental ailments. I only used shrieking essences on these because I'm trying to keep the cost down because I was a bit tight on money and they were 2C each. So even if you had to use 40 of them, it's only 80 chaos. You're going to hit something in that amount of essences. And all you would do is if you end up loads over on one resistance, just use harvest to turn one resistance into another. So with that done, I then had to just roll the implicit for elemental ailments, just use lesser icons and they're dirt cheap. They're about something like 6 icons for 3 chaos or something. So it's not going to cost you very much to do that. We're now well over ailment avoidance cap, but we are capped, which is all that matters. And for me to get capped on just the implicit on the boots would have been really expensive because I'd have to push it up to, I think, exquisite, which is just not worth it when we could just give up a suffix to craft the rest of the missing Ellie ailments. So just this rejig and then the jewel means I can drop purity of elements as long as I am resistance capped, and then I can slot in anger. That's already a ton more DPS. I've then recrafted my helmet because it wasn't very good. I've just spammed life essences until I hit big resistances. If I had an open prefix, which I did, we'd just craft in more physical taken as Ellie. We've not done anything with the implicits. We're still using the same helmet. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I didn't go for the Tornado Shot helmet yet because it would have been all of my currency and I feel it's much better off spent the way I've spent it. So the quiver ended up costing me 3 divines and then a couple of exalts. The boots I've just recrafted fairly cheaply. We bought the jewel for 1.3 and then just recrafted the helmet nice and cheap as well. So the only other thing I needed to do was get the +1 projectile tattoo. These are 8 divines. They are tattoo of the Ramako Makanga. And then I've also bought a Warrior's Tale Crimson Jewel, which was a divine. You put your jewel in here, which replaces your Brutal Restraint. You need to take this accuracy node here. And then I've also taken these frenzy nodes because you need all of these small passives to actually get this tattoo to work. This gives you +1 projectile, but with the jewel slotted in here, it gives you +2. What you also want to do, if you're maxing this, but I haven't done it yet because I haven't bought the tattoos, is any small tattoos are going to get doubled as well. So you've got space here, there is space here, and then you could take this node for a tattoo as well. You could get things like, because it's double, you could get 16% projectile speed, you could get 4% movement speed, loads of nice things you can get in there, but there's only a couple of spaces where you can take them. That is something I'll do later. I just don't have the currency to do it at the moment. The only unfortunate thing is to free up the points, I've had to drop the increased onslaught effect, and it is actually noticeable in maps. I'm a little bit slower attacking, which is pretty noticeable, and movement speed is not too bad. So I would like to get them back. I'm just not sure what nodes I'll give up because really it's giving up movement speed, which I don't want to do. I'd have to find suppression on gear to give up these. So I don't really have much of an option. I could probably look at rejigging this bit of the tree if we can get more strengthening and drop a lot of this bit here. That could get me my onslaught nodes back. But for now, it's absolutely fine. So now we've done that, we can drop GMP. I do think it's borderline because without GMP, I'm only at 8 projectiles. And ideally, I'd want a minimum of 9. So we essentially have 2 from this tattoo here. We have 1 from the quiver. We have 2 from the tree. That makes 5. Then we have 2 from the ascendancy and then your normal 1 that you get with the skill. So we have 8 projectiles. I'm not sure dropping GMP is the right thing to do. I think it's probably borderline for DPS and dropping the projectiles is probably slightly worse for clear. But what it does mean is it makes your mana a bit more manageable because Mirage Archer has less of a mana multiplier than GMP. So just to make things fair, I've just slotted a normal inspiration because I noticed I had a divergent in there before, and I think there are a couple of divines. We've left the bow. We've still gone with a 5 link. I think at this stage we can probably stick our 6th gem in, although Rain of Hours is definitely not the best DPS gem. I just can't be bothered to buy a gem. And we've not changed anything else. Everything else on the build has stayed the same. The belt needs upgrading. It's pretty bad. It's whether we buy a new one, recraft it, go for a different base, get a Stygian. I probably want to go for a Stygian Vise because we can get a massive damage Abyss Jewel in, and you can get them fairly cheap that can give sort of 6 to 7% more damage for your entire build. So I think that's probably something worth doing. But they're the upgrades I've made for now. So it's going to give me a lot more damage, both single target and clear, because I've got anger in instead of purity. And we've basically dropped 1 projectile, but we've gained a damage gem and dropped a less damage gem. So overall, it looks fine. I've tested it for a couple of runs and it works okay, but I am now absolutely strapped for currency. Don't feel like you have to move away from this first strategy if you're finding it's nice and simple, because it is very safe. Other than the 1 death I took when I decided to try and push Delhi into it as well, I've managed to level from 97 to 98. Now I'm at 98. I don't really need to worry about levels because I'm probably not going to hit 99. So I can start pushing some harder content that gives us better returns. One more thing to add, which I think I did mention, is if you can't find a good +1 arrow quiver, don't worry about it. Just keep GMP in instead of Mirage Archer. I really don't think there's much difference from having 8 projectiles with Mirage or having 12 projectiles without Mirage. In all honesty, I think GMP might be slightly better, but I'm sort of on the borderline. If you can't get an additional arrow quiver for a decent amount of money yet, don't bother. We are going to craft a big quiver later on, so don't spend any more than a few divines on it because we are going to be replacing it later on. I got super lucky in that I could probably sell this quiver now for 5 divines, but I'm going to keep it until we upgrade the quiver. So before we go on to the next strategy, I'm going to touch on the upgrades that I want to make next. I still think the helmet is too expensive to be the next upgrade, and I am still sitting on this basically League Start crafted bow that I would like to upgrade. We could also have the option of crafting our big quiver, but we're going to need probably 25 to 30 divines to do it. And then obviously we can look at this terrible belt as well. The gloves I'm kind of happy with at the minute. I do need to make a decision as to whether we go the Calm's way and then we go Rage, or we just stay with Rares. Because I've built it with Rares at the moment, I think I'm going to stick with it. Then the only other thing we need to decide on is, do we drop Lightning Coil and go Hiris for much more damage? We get free suppression, so we can free up nodes on the tree to get life. But we're not going to have any fizz mitigation, and losing this 50% is probably going to mean we die a lot in maps. So maybe once I need to really, really push content, we'll go Hiris, because you just accept deaths as you go through tough mapping strategies. As long as you're blitzing stuff down really quickly, the deaths should still be fairly few and far between. Hiris also gives you a ton of evasion, so it does mean that we are going to be getting hit less. But at this stage of building the character, I'm not comfortable dropping this chest yet, because I think we are going to need some help surviving. I have managed to actually drop these 2 points here, but in order to do it, I've literally got all attribute tattoos on nearly all of my nodes where I can, other than these double ones here, because there just isn't anywhere to get strength and intelligence on the tree. So don't worry too much if you can't, because it is quite expensive, I guess, to get, say, 10 or 11 of these tattoos. I've done it just to get a bit more life, because I don't like being under 4k life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the next strategy that I'm going to do. I've already given it a test for about an hour, and it's working really well. There's footage in the background showing it, and it is basically a boss rushing strategy. We're going to show the tree in a moment, but we are still keeping with Wandering Path for a couple of reasons. One is that you can still drop a decent amount of boss maps even without taking the chance to drop increased boss maps. And the maps that we're running are super, super popular at the minute, and you can't even buy these in bulk for like 7 or 8 chaos each on TFT. So if I said to you, go and buy 200 mesas, we're going to do a boss rushing strat, you probably wouldn't be able to get them, or they'd be super overpriced to the point it eats too much into your profit. So because of that, there's a few things we also need to do to make sure we sustain, because you don't want to be buying these maps. So before we jump into it, let's just talk about how to get these maps if you haven't got any. So if we quickly look at the Atlas tree and we look at Mesa and Dunes, which are the maps that will be running, they are here. They're connected, and we're going to be ping-ponging between the two. However, both these are quite hard to buy in bulk and are expensive. You're probably going to need around 10 maps to get you going, and that should make sure that you sustain from there on out. Your options if you don't have maps and you don't want to buy them is see if you've got an estuary or an iceberg map, run those, favorite Mesa, and then you'll drop Mesas. Or if you don't have any, you could buy them and they'll be much cheaper than buying the other maps. And we are boss rushing anyway. You can still boss rush these maps. You're still going to get progress to your invitation. It's just going to mean you're not spending a lot of money on maps. So you would want probably 10 icebergs or 10 estuary or a mix of the two, which is what I had. I think I had 7 maps combined and I ended up getting 12 maps from those. And they were enough to sustain the strategy. Once you've got a combination of 10 mesas or dunes, you should be good to go. So let's have a look at the Atlas tree. Very similar to the last one. We're going shrines and we are going Kirak missions. Ignore where I've taken the majors here. I didn't mean to. They don't actually do anything. And then we're also taking chance for bosses to drop invitations. And that's it. But this time, instead of farming altars, we're farming the bosses. We're getting bosses down within 25 to 40 seconds, picking up what drops, getting out the map, rinsing and repeating. I'd say the reason we're doing Wandering Path is you will not sustain this without Wandering Path, and the maps are very expensive, and I think it really eats into the profit unless you've got a build that can get the maps done in like 15 to 20 seconds guaranteed. And even then, you are still going to be paying a lot of money for the maps. So the way you're going to run the strategy is you're going to favorite whatever map you are not running. The reason being is we are boss rushing, so we're not clearing the whole map. If you just ignore your favorites and just leave them the same, you may not sustain. The reason we're doing it is you're guaranteed to drop a connected map. If you only had Mesa favorited once and you run Dunes, for example, which is here, you have got a chance of dropping Residence or Plateau instead of Mesa. To make sure that doesn't happen, you just favorite Mesa all but one, and then you keep Dunes favorited in case it decides to drop a Dunes. So what you would do, you would have, say, 10 Mesa maps. You'd set your favorites up like this. All Dunes bar 1 and 1 Mesa. You would run all of your Mesa maps. You'll then drop, say, 12 to 15 Dune maps. You're then going to reverse your favorites. All of them Mesa bar 1 and then Dunes. And then you run Dunes so that the connecting map you drop is very, very likely to be Mesa. You can sustain without it, but I have noticed map drops are much more frequent when you flip between your favorites. And because you should be running them in batches of 8 to 10, it really doesn't take a lot of time to do it. You're going to be alching all of your maps because you're taking some of the top hat nodes to get increased modifier effects. That just means you're going to get more drops, more stuff to drop from the boss. And you essentially want to ignore almost anything that drops in maps unless it's at the value of an Awakened Sextant or it literally drops at your feet and it takes no time to pick it up. Don't go out of your way to go and pick up Chaos Orbs and Silver Coins because it is going to eat into your profit. It may sound silly, but spending 5 seconds going off screen to go and get a Chaos Orb is wasted currency because of how quickly we're turning maps around. So all you're doing is rushing to the boss. They're both very easy to get to the boss. Mesa, you just literally run up the path and then the boss is there. Dunes, you just traverse to the opposite side of the map. So with Dunes, you are most likely to get more maps dropped from that because you're going to be killing more monsters. Feel free to spend an extra 5 to 10 seconds in a map to try and get a map to drop because it is guaranteed that at least one map is going to drop from a connected monster. We also have a huge chance to duplicate maps. So if you're a Mesa and you drop a Dune, there's a good chance you're going to drop 2 of them. And you want to be doing, if you can, 3 invitation runs in an hour is what I've just about managed to do. Even if you're a bit less, you're still going to be making a ton of currency. Let's say you're just doing 2.5 rotations per hour. That's still okay. Now, because you are going to be tight with your maps, you can't really just roll 60 maps and off you go. So the way you want to do it is prep all of the map of one type. So let's say you've got 10 Dunes. Prep all your Dunes, run them all. Then you'll drop 12 to 14 Mesas, for example. Prep all them, switch your favorites around, run all the Mesas, and then just keep rinsing and repeating. Once you get used to it, it's a really quick process and you won't even notice the time that you're losing. So if we just pull up a map watch for the last 25 maps I've done, it will give you an idea of the time. And this is including stash and loot and rejigging the favorite slots when I need to. And I've got pretty good at doing it. So here I've taken 55 seconds to prep my favorites. And then I have a feeling I did it later on as well, which would be 1 minute 11 in town. So I need to get a little bit quicker, but that's kind of the time it's taken me to roll my maps and switch my favorites, then get the map back in and run. And as you can see, the time for the 25 maps started at 16 or 18:31 and ended at 18:48. So it's 16 to 17 minutes to do 25 maps, and that's with prepping the maps and changing the favorite system. When I can keep that pace up, it is just over 3 invitation runs per hour. And it is important to keep it quick because you don't drop a ton of stuff with this strategy, but what you do drop is from the bosses. So the more you can do, the quicker you can do them, the more currency you're going to make. So let's just go in and have a look at my stash for the 3 invitation runs that I did, which, as I said, was just under an hour, like it was like 59 minutes. So we have our 3 incandescent invitations, and these, unless they've changed, 1.2 to 1.3 divines, you could probably sell all 3 for 4 divines in bulk. We have 3 Polarics, which are not worth a particularly large amount of currency. You can maybe sell them in bulk for like 4C. We've had 2 invitations drop. We've had Elder Slayers, which is 130C minimum. And then we've had a Formed, which is also about 130C. So over 1 divine for these 2 invitations combined. I did get lucky and got a Sacred Grove memory drop and a Harbinger's memory. I wouldn't necessarily count this because you're unlikely to get them, but it's obviously a nice thing to have drop. Then we've had 1 synth map drop, 6 Cirrus maps, and 3 Elder maps. I actually think I've been unlucky with the amount of boss maps I've had. I've done this strategy loads this league and last league, and I dropped quite a lot more than this the last time I did it. I think I'm probably on the bad side of RNG for this. But these maps on average go for about 50C. The more you can get, the more you're going to be able to charge for them. So overall, I would think if we call these 1.3 divines, these are probably maybe 0.4 divines. So if we had all these together, these are probably 2 divines, these maps here. This, as I've already said, was over a divine. These are about 4. So you're looking at 7 to 8 divines worth of loot for that hour, and it is self-sustainable, and other than your scours and your alchemies, it's a free strategy. These are my 2 starting strats that I always like to do when I'm trying to build up a character with limited funds. So it's around 7 to 8 divines profit, and that's not including these 2 memories. If we include them, it's 10 to 11 divines for that hour. And I think you should easily do 6 to 7 divines plus on this strategy if you can get 3 rotations done in an hour. Just be very careful about your sustain. Don't worry too much about being in and out of maps in 20 seconds. You want to kill as many enemies as you can on the way to the boss, or you're not going to sustain your maps. Then you're going and trying to buy maps at like 7 to 8C, or you're running suboptimal maps. I will say if you get estuary maps drop, keep them. They're not a terrible map to run. They join to Mesa. If you end up with 4 or 5 of them, but you run out of Mesas and Dunes, favorite Mesa all the way down. Run your estuaries. You'll probably end up with like 9 to 10 Mesa maps, and you can start again. So this is a strategy I'm going to be doing, and I really enjoy this type of strategy. So realistically, I'm probably going to be doing this for about 10 hours. I'm hoping then to have 60 to 70 divines at the end of it. Then we can actually start making the character push some real hard content. So at the moment, it's about 25 divines invested, but for this strategy, it performs really, really well. The last thing to note is I have made some changes to make this strategy more efficient for my character. I've added these onslaught effect nodes back in by dropping the life nodes that I took. And I'm also not running anger, even though I've just put it into the build. I'm running haste instead to get more movement speed and more attack speed. It's still decent DPS. It's not as good as anger, but I've got more than enough for this sort of strategy. As mentioned, the only thing you need to be careful of is reflect maps. You should be able to run any other modifiers on maps. You don't need leech if you've set the character up like this, because we get life and mana on hit, and our mana, well, it doesn't go down. We don't need any mana at all. No regen, you should still be fine as well because our skills cost very little. You just can't do Fizz Reflect and you can't do Ellie Reflect. Any other type of map mod you can run. So I will join you for the next video. It will be a few days because I'm working. So it's going to be maybe 3 days. I'll be able to get that 10 hours playing. We'll see what sort of currency we've got and then we'll go from there. The last point to make about this strategy, again, which is what I like about all my strategies, and I hate running strategies that don't involve this, is it's super easy to liquidate. So if we go on to TFT, for example, you would just go to your softcore bulk want to sell, you'd go to maps, and then you'd sell all your Conqueror and Guardian maps here. And as long as you price them competitively, you're going to get whispered almost instantly for these maps. The only thing I will say is don't get lazy and use this want to buy channel to sell your maps, people will ask for silly prices on here most of the time. This is more people chancing their luck. So if we go and we find some serious Conqueror maps, so here, for example, this guy wants to buy the Conqueror maps for 38C each, when I know they'll sell almost instantly for around 50C each. So don't go to want to buy, go to want to sell, list it up, price it competitively. They'll sell really, really quickly. That's kind of it for this video. I have really enjoyed this series so far, and I'm looking forward to how far we can push the build and what different strategies we can utilize. That's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.